I'm a Reva, alhamdulillah. I always had a belief in one God. I went to Turkey, I think when I was about 7 years old, and I remember hearing the Adhan for the first time and just being amazed. There was a real sense of community that I just didn't feel so much at home. And I remember as a 7-year-old kind of crying, leaving it. Eventually, I finally wound down to just reading the Quran myself. It felt like Allah was speaking directly to me. I just had this intent and just instinct that this could not have came from a man. And I remember closing the book, just crying, and I knew I had to take Shahada at that point. It was quite difficult, finding places to work. I was juggling between that and a marriage that was failing. I didn't really have too much of a support network. My ex-wife had approached the police stating that I held certain views which I've denied, and it made things hard for me where I'd be getting random calls and have people outside my property at the night. There was just a sense of intimidation that just made it very hard to have any kind of quality of life. It made me feel like I was already in prison, like I was being watched, like I couldn't really be myself. I used to work at a charity. They were getting visited about myself. It just gave a feeling that I'm not going to be left alone. Almost a sense of trying to force me into isolation. I was arrested while I was abroad in Turkey. I was deported back to the UK. So somebody on like a social media platform was used as evidence against me who turned out to be an agent. It felt like I was being groomed or entrapped when I was in a vulnerable situation, not really knowing anyone and having no money to really live, and feeling like I can't really come back to the UK due to the feeling of harassment. I was there for 7 months, see a detention facility that was semi-underground without access to books or pens or anything. I was beaten. I didn't quite know what was going on. I was still suffering from mental health issues. I'd only been Muslim for about 6 months at that stage, so I was still very naive. When I was deported, I was placed in like a police station within a police station. I don't recall being able to contact family until 7 days. It was a very isolated experience. My mother, she would get random calls and felt like she was being followed. The BBC had tried harassing her. It was very hard on myself and on them. There was only contact via letters at that stage. I think my biggest struggles was the sense of this is what it's going to be like forever. And you've been stripped of your identity, and you've been stripped of what matters to you and what makes you you. If I've ordered lunch, I'd be given something that contained pork instead. If it was time for Friday prayers, I wouldn't be let out the door. So there was that same pervading sense of being stripped of identity and denied access to it. It felt degrading and at the same time frustrating. If I put a discrimination complaint, it would be thrown back to me, and there was no opportunity to receive any sort of justice. Major physical and psychological impact. There were officers that had beaten me in segregation in prison. There were ones that would threaten me with rape and other things. We take my prison ID with a very short dressing gown on and nothing below the waist. That would throw my Quran in the toilet and have their search dog defecate in the room. I think what kept me strong, after each interrogation, there'd be a sense in the night where I wouldn't be bothered, and it would just be me and Allah. I'd be able to read the Quran and see the sky through the window above me, and it would just give me hope. The weeks building up to leaving prison, I would be woken up at 5 in the morning by search teams and make me do a strip search and search my room every day for about a week. It just all gave me a pervading sense of you're not going to be left alone, or don't think that this is the end of it because you're going to get released. At the same time, trying to find any excuse to keep me in prison. So coming out of prison and being told about additional legislation of 15 years whereby any phone number, any email, any home address, any travel has to be notified of. The police have the right to continue to come to my property and to see me, and if I don't, then they can break in. There was just a sense of that I'd moved just from one prison to a slightly more open prison. Just felt very isolated. I think I was close to 2 miles from the nearest halal butchers and mosque. The only gym that I was approved to go to was 3 miles away. The only mosque I was approved to pray in was 2 miles away. I was so far away from any semblance of community that I felt I belonged in. I was able to get a bank account. As soon as I left that hostel, within 10 days the bank account was closed without any reason given. I couldn't find another account that would accept me. Everywhere was rejecting me. The money that I had in that account was sent to me via a check that I couldn't cash unless I had an account to cash it in. I had no identification at the time. It took about 4 weeks to receive any sort of benefits money. So that was at the point when I reached out to Hugs, because I had no means of supporting myself or being able to have food to eat. I remember calling, just explaining my situation, that there's nowhere for me to live in. I had no local connection to anywhere. They seemed very supportive and very open to assisting me with rent in that situation. When I couldn't get a bank account or have any money, I recontacted Hugs of that, and they very, very quickly and swiftly begun to help me out with that. I wouldn't have been able to pay the service charge to the property I was living in. I would have been made homeless, wouldn't have had anything to eat, and may not have even been alive today due to that. I'm trying to meet my wife, who's in Morocco. I've tried to fly out there to meet her and been open and honest with the officers and who I need to notify, despite which they've been took away my passport and they're trying to have it cancelled. Having the Hugs vouchers helps me to support my wife while she's stranded and upset in a different country without me. And it allows me to try and plan for some kind of quality in life in the future, to just generally take care of myself and my family. I had a great support from Hugs in Ramadan. Had a very nice oud, bukhor from them and some books and a cake. It made me cry, alhamdulillah. I had to make sujood shukr and because it was a feeling, despite how isolated it feels, that there are others that care. Feeling reconnected to a community that I felt isolated and cut off from for a long time. That was great. That was very, very good experience. I didn't have to sit at home. I didn't have to feel like I couldn't introduce myself or speak to anyone. It just felt like a safe space, and it just felt like a reconnection to a community. There's people from all walks of life that are affected by the measures. I don't feel most people realize how damaging it can be and the long-term implications it has on the people involved and their families. Trying to explain to my wife, who I recently got married to, it's incredibly difficult to find a bank account, and she's baffled at that. The idea that I have to notify if I wanted to go on a pedal bike that has electronic attachment whereby it can be propelled electronically, I'd have to notify to the police that I'm using that. There's a lot of things where people are unaware of this, and the long drawn effects of this, the sense of harassment and lack of personal space and lack of quality of life of this, where if there wasn't or any organisation like Hugs there to provide support of this, I literally would have starved and been on the streets. And I can imagine that happening to a lot of other people as well. So I see it as crucial that there are organisations such as Hugs that can help and bring awareness to people in these situations and affected by it. And when people do find out, they're very surprised that this actually happens in a country like the UK. With the recent situation between Palestine, there are people that are attending legitimate protests that are being arrested. I believe people should support it because they should be aware that they never know when they may fall under the legislation or be affected by it themselves. People in these situations going through these hardships, they're still part of a community, and they're still their brother or their sister, and they still should be helped. There just isn't really anything else in place without the organisations like Hugs. There is nothing after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. to fall back on. If I myself would literally be on the streets if it wasn't for hugs. Get in touch with hugs as soon as possible, rather than suffering it alone and thinking that no one's there or no one's interested or nobody wants to know. This could happen to them, this could happen to their wives, their mothers, their sons. No one should feel isolated due to that or feel that there's no help or support. It's crucial to maintain a sense of community and that there is still people out there that are making dua and helping and would still reach out. As the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, or they're like one solid structure, whereas if one part feels sick, then the other is raised to help and rescue it. The reason someone such as myself is denied a bank account, denied access to see their wife and just have some sort of quality of life without harassment and having the police come and see me once a week, it seems like these things are only there because no one knows about them. And when no one knows about them, there's no one to speak out. It's important to listen, support in any way, because it may be their help and support that changes these situations, brings awareness and stops it from happening to somebody else.